Chapter 17. That all care is to be cast upon God. My son, suffer me to do with thee what I will. I know what is expedient for thee. Thou thinkest as a man. In many things thou judgest as human affection persuadeth thee. Lord, what thou sayest is true. Greater is thy care for me than all the care which I am able to take for myself. For too insecurely doth he stand who casteth not all his care upon thee. Lord, so long as my will standeth right and firm in thee, do with me what thou wilt, for whatsoever thou shalt do with me cannot be aught but good. Blessed be thou if thou wilt leave me in darkness. Blessed also be thou if thou wilt leave me in light. Blessed be thou if thou vouchsafe to comfort me, and always blessed be thou if thou cause me to be troubled. My son, even thus thou must stand if thou desirest to walk with me. Thou must be ready alike for suffering or rejoicing. Thou must be poor and needy as willingly as full and rich. Lord, I will willingly bear for thee whatsoever thou wilt have to come upon me. Without choice I will receive from thy hand good and evil, sweet and bitter, joy and sadness, and will give thee thanks for all things which shall happen unto me. Keep me from all sin, and I will not fear death, nor hell. Only cast me not away forever, nor blot me out of the book of life. Then no tribulation which shall come upon me shall do me hurt. Chapter 18. That temporal miseries are to be borne patiently after the example of Christ. My son, I came down from heaven for thy salvation. I took upon me thy miseries not of necessity, but drawn by love, that thou mightest learn patience and mightest bear temporal miseries without murmuring. For from the hour of my birth until my death upon the cross, I ceased not from bearing of sorrow. I had much lack of temporal things. I oftentimes heard many reproaches against myself. I gently bore contradictions and hard words. I received ingratitude for benefits, blasphemies for my miracles, rebukes for my doctrine. Lord, because thou wast patient in thy life, herein most of all fulfilling the commandment of thy Father, it is well that I, miserable sinner, should patiently bear myself according to thy will, and as long as thou wilt have it so, should bear about with me for my salvation the burden of this corruptible life. For although the present life seemeth burdensome, it is nevertheless already made very full of merit through thy grace. And to those who are weak it becometh easier and brighter through thy example and the footsteps of thy saints. But it is also much more full of consolation than it was of old, under the Old Testament, when the gate of heaven remained shut, and even the way to heaven seemed more obscure, when so few cared to seek after the heavenly kingdom. But not even those who were then just and in the way of salvation were able, before thy passion and the ransom of thy holy death, to enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh, what great thanks am I bound to give thee, who hast vouchsafed to show me and all faithful people the good and right way to thine eternal kingdom. For thy way is our way, and by holy patience we walk to thee, who art our crown. If thou hadst not gone before and taught us, who would care to follow? Oh, how far would they have gone backward if they had not beheld thy glorious example? Behold, we are still lukewarm, though we have heard of thy many signs and discourses. What would become of us if we had not such a light to help us follow thee? Chapter 19. Of bearing injuries, and who shall be approved as truly patient. What sayest thou, my son? Cease to complain. Consider my sufferings and that of my saints. Thou hast not yet resisted unto blood. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 4. It is little which thou sufferest in comparison with those who have suffered so many things, have been so strongly tempted, so grievously troubled, so many wise proved and tried. Thou oughtest therefore to call to mind the more grievous sufferings of others, that thou mightest bear thy lesser ones more easily. And if they seem not to thee little, see that it is not thy impatience which is the cause of this. But whether they be little or whether they be great, study to bear them all with patience. So far as thou settest thyself to bear patiently, so far thou dost wisely and art deserving of the more merit. Thou shalt also bear the more easily if thy mind and habit are carefully trained hereunto. And say not, I cannot bear these things from such a man, nor are things of this kind to be borne by me, for he hath done me grievous harm, and imputeth to me what I had never thought. But from another I will suffer patiently such things as I see I ought to suffer. Foolish is such a thought as this, for it considereth not the virtue of patience, nor by whom that virtue is to be crowned, but it rather weigheth persons and offenses against self. He is not truly patient who will only suffer as far as seemeth right to himself, and from whom he pleaseth. But the truly patient man considereth not by what man he is tried, whether by one above him, or by an equal or inferior, whether by a good and holy man, or a perverse and unworthy, but indifferently from every creature whatsoever, or how often soever adversity happeneth to him, he gratefully accepteth all from the hand of God, and counteth it great gain. For with God nothing which is borne for his sake, however small, shall lose its reward. Be thou therefore ready for the fight, if thou wilt have the victory. Without striving, thou canst not win the crown of patience. If thou wilt not suffer, thou refusest to be crowned. But if thou desirest to be crowned, strive manfully, endure patiently. Without labor thou drawest not near to rest, nor without fighting comest thou to victory. Make possible to me, O Lord, by grace, what seemeth impossible to me by nature. Thou knowest how little I am able to bear, and how quickly I am cast down when a like adversity riseth up against me. Whatsoever trial of tribulation may come to me, may it become unto me pleasing and acceptable, for to suffer and be vexed for thy sake is exceeding healthful to the soul. Chapter 20. Of confession of our infirmity, and of the miseries of this life. I will acknowledge my sin unto thee. Psalm 32, verse 5. I will confess to thee, Lord, my infirmity. It is often a small thing which casteth me down and maketh me sad. I resolve that I will act bravely, but when a little temptation cometh immediately, I am in a great strait. Wonderfully small sometimes is the matter whence a grievous temptation cometh, and whilst I imagine myself safe for a little space, when I am not considering, I find myself almost overcome by a little puff of wind. Behold, therefore, O Lord, my humility and my frailty, which is altogether known to thee. Be merciful unto me, and draw me out of the mire, that I sink not, lest I ever remain cast down. This is what frequently throweth me backward and confoundeth me before thee, that I am so liable to fall, so weak to resist my passions. Psalm 59, verse 16. And though their assault is not altogether according to my will, it is violent and grievous, and it altogether wearieth me to live thus daily in conflict. Herein is my infirmity made known to me, that hateful fancies always rush in far more easily than they depart. O that thou, most mighty God of Israel, lover of all faithful souls, would look upon the labor and sorrow of thy servant, and give him help in all things whereunto he striveth. Strengthen me with heavenly fortitude, lest the old man, this miserable flesh, not being yet fully subdued to the Spirit, prevail to rule over me, against which I ought to strive so long as I remain in this most miserable life. Oh, what a life is this, where tribulations and miseries cease not, where all things are full of snares and of enemies, for when one tribulation or temptation goeth, another cometh. Yea, while the former conflict is yet raging, others come more in number and unexpected. And how can the life of man be loved, seeing that it hath so many bitter things, that it is subjected to so many calamities and miseries? How can it even be called life when it produces so many deaths and plagues? The world is often reproached because it is deceitful and vain, yet notwithstanding it is not easily given up, because the lusts of the flesh have too much rule over it. Some draw us to love, some to hate. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, these draw to love of the world. But the punishments and miseries which righteously follow these things bring forth hatred of the world and weariness. But alas, an evil desire conquereth a mind given to the world, and thinketh it happiness to be under the nettles, because it savoreth not, nor perceiveth the sweetness of God, nor the inward gracefulness of virtue. But they who perfectly despise the world, and strive to live unto God in holy discipline, these are not ignorant of the divine sweetness promised to all who truly deny themselves, and see clearly how grievously the world erreth, and in how many ways it is deceived. Job chapter 30, verse 7.